The alien's blood was unlike anything Jack Mason had seen in 40 years of medicine. It glowed faintly blue under the harsh lights of the secret medical bay, viscous and metallic as it pooled on the steel table. Around him, younger doctors in hazmat suits had already stepped back, their shoulders slumped in defeat. But Jack hadn't survived a MASH unit in Desert Storm by giving up on patients who still had a chance. "Vital signs fading," called out Dr. Winters, a 30-something physician who looked at Jack like he was a museum piece. "We should call it, sir." Jack ignored him, his weathered hands steady as they had been decades ago, when mortar fire shook the hospital tents. The alien's chest, covered with what looked like iridescent scales, rose and fell in shallow, desperate movements. Its eyes remained closed, the facial features both eerily human and undeniably foreign. "Give me a transfusion setup and something to seal these wounds," Jack said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone who'd made life or death decisions while bombs fell around him. "Sir, with all due respect, we don't even know its blood type," Winters protested. "The protocol for unknown extraterrestrial, the protocol won't matter if it's dead." Jack cut him off, already reaching for the instrument tray. "I've seen men survive with incompatible field transfusions for long enough to get them proper care. We need to stabilize, not cure." The other doctors exchanged glances, a mix of doubt and reluctant respect. Jack Mason was a relic in their eyes, a 68-year-old former combat medic now relegated to administrative duty at this classified Air Force facility. But in moments like this, when the rulebook failed, experience trumped theory. Jack worked with methodical efficiency, adapting battlefield techniques he'd used in Kuwait to this impossible scenario. He stabilized torn vessels with makeshift clamps, applied pressure where needed, and improvised a sealant for the chest wound using medical adhesive in a pattern he'd once used on a soldier whose lung had collapsed under enemy fire. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the irregular beeping of monitoring equipment. Then, when it seemed even Jack's determination might not be enough, the beeping steadied. The alien's chest began to rise and fall with greater strength. And finally, the eyes opened. They were unlike any eyes Jack had seen, deep blue with vertical pupils that expanded suddenly in the light. The creature's gaze fixed on Jack with an intensity that made the room seem to fade away. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding beyond words or species. Then came the voice, not spoken, but somehow appearing directly in Jack's mind, clear as a radio transmission. "The one who stands between stars." The alien's hand, four-fingered with skin like polished stone, reached up and touched Jack's forearm. A sensation like static electricity ran through him. Not painful, but impossible to ignore. When the hand fell away, a strange symbol remained on Jack's skin, glowing faintly blue, like the creature's blood. Before anyone could react, the alien slipped back into unconsciousness, but this time with stable vital signs. The younger doctors moved in, then their skepticism replaced by cautious excitement as they began proper treatment protocols. Jack stepped back, suddenly aware of how his old knees ached from standing tense for so long. He glanced down at the symbol on his arm, curved lines interwoven with what looked like astronomical marks. Already the glow was fading, but the pattern remained neither a burn nor a tattoo, but something altogether different. "Dr. Mason," said a voice from the doorway. Jack turned to see Colonel Harris, the facility commander, watching him with an unreadable expression. "We need to talk." The debriefing room was sparse and secure, buried deep within the classified facility. Colonel Harris, a career military man in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair, stood at the window looking out at the Arizona desert. Behind him, satellite images of an unknown spacecraft were displayed on multiple screens. "The symbol on your arm, Shayo," Harris said without preamble, "matches markings we've observed on their vessels. Our linguists have been trying to decipher their language for weeks without success, and you get a direct download in 5 minutes of emergency surgery." He turned, fixing Jack with a penetrating stare. "Care to explain that?" Jack met his gaze steadily. In another life, he might have been intimidated by the colonel's rank, but he'd treated too many dying men to be easily cowed by stars and bars. "I can't explain it, sir. The alien touched me, and this appeared." Jack glanced at the mark, which had settled into what looked like a silvery scar on his skin. "It said something about standing between stars, that's all." Harris nodded slowly. "Our guest is part of an advanced diplomatic team from what they call the Astraeus Empire. First contact was made 3 weeks ago when their scout ship entered our atmosphere damaged. What you treated today was their medical officer. Jack processed this information carefully. The facility had been buzzing with rumors for weeks, but concrete information had been sparse. Why am I hearing this now? Harris's mouth tightened. Because in approximately 12 hours, a royal delegation from Astreus will enter Earth orbit. They've requested the presence of their advanced team, and specifically the human who bears their royal seal. He nodded toward Jack's arm. Congratulations, Doctor. You've been drafted into interstellar diplomacy. The room fell silent as the implications settled over Jack. After a lifetime of patching up soldiers, of watching the worst humanity could do to itself, he was now facing something beyond anything he had imagined. Not even his wildest dreams during those nights in the desert, looking up at stars between bombings, had prepared him for this. There's more, Harris continued, touching a control that changed the display to show a new image. The Astreus are not merely making social calls. Outside the phones. They're here because their crown princess is seeking a consort. The image showed what appeared to be a humanoid female figure with blue-tinged skin and elaborate ceremonial attire. Even through the alien features, Jack could discern a striking beauty and strength in her posture. A consort, Jack repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. Colonel, I'm a 68-year-old widower with bad knees and grandkids older than most of your staff. Surely they don't mean... They don't work like us, Harris interrupted. From what we understand, they value experience and wisdom far more than youth. But more importantly, that symbol on your arm, it's not just their royal seal. According to our translators, it marks you as one who sees truth through pain. Apparently, that's a rare and valued trait in their culture. Jack looked down at his hands, still steady despite the decades, still capable, despite the arthritis that had begun to gnaw at his joints. Hands that had held together men torn apart by war, that had comforted the dying when medicine wasn't enough. I'm just a doctor, he said quietly. Not anymore, Harris replied. Now you're humanity's best hope for a peaceful first contact. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The president has been briefed. This goes beyond military or even national interests. You're representing our entire species. The weight of those words settled on Jack's shoulders like a physical burden. He thought of his late wife, Margaret, who'd always believed he was meant for something important. He thought of his children living their own lives, now rarely calling the old man, except on holidays. He thought of the quiet retirement he'd planned, fishing, perhaps writing those memoirs Margaret had always encouraged. All of that seemed very far away now. When do we leave? He asked simply. The briefing lasted through the night. Jack absorbed as much as he could about the Astreus Empire, a civilization thousands of years advanced beyond Earth, spanning dozens of star systems. They were humanoid, but distinct, with blue-tinted skin, enhanced sensory abilities, and lifespans stretching centuries. Their society valued order, experience, and a concept their translators called truth vision, the ability to see beyond surface appearances to underlying realities. Jack's quarters were sparse but comfortable, a temporary room assigned to him in the secure wing of the facility. As dawn broke over the desert, he stood at the small window, watching the sunrise paint the landscape in hues of gold and red. In his hand, he held an old compass, battered and worn, its needle no longer true. A keepsake from Kuwait, from a man named Rodriguez, who'd bled out under Jack's hands despite everything he could do. Looks like we're heading into uncharted territory again, Rod, he murmured to the compass, a habit he'd developed over the years. Speaking to the dead kept them alive, somehow kept their sacrifice meaningful. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Sarah Chen entered, one of the few specialists he genuinely respected, a virologist in her mid-50s, who treated him as a colleague rather than a relic. They told me you're leaving with the diplomatic team, she said without preamble. I thought you might want these. She handed him a small case of what looked like specialized medical tools. Field surgical kit adapted for potentially non-human anatomy, plus some broad-spectrum antibiotics and analgesics that should work across different biochemistries, at least in theory. Jack accepted the case, touched by the gesture. Expecting me to run a MASH unit in space. Sarah's expression remained serious. Jack, you need to understand what you're walking into. The Astreus aren't the only advanced species out there. From what they've shared, there's an entire galactic political system with alliances, rivalries, and conflicts we can barely comprehend. I'm just a doctor, Jack repeated his earlier protest, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. No, Sarah said firmly. You're the man wearing their royal seal. And from what our xenobiologists have pieced together, that makes you significant. The Astraeus princess has rejected hundreds of suitors from powerful civilizations. Whatever that mark means, it's important enough that they're willing to consider a human from a backwater planet with barely a century of powered flight. Jack glanced at the symbol on his arm, now looking like an intricate silver tattoo. Did they tell you what the princess is looking for in a consort? Sarah's expression softened slightly. The translator said something about one who sees without deception. Apparently, she has some kind of empathic ability. She can sense others' true intentions. Every suitor so far has apparently wanted something from her Empire Resources Technology military alliance. None wanted her for herself. Jack absorbed this information, thinking of his own marriage to Margaret, 43 years of partnership built on mutual respect and genuine care. They'd had their struggles, especially when he returned from war, changed in ways she couldn't fully understand. But they'd faced life together, supporting each other's dreams and healing each other's wounds. I'm not a diplomat, he said finally. I don't know the first thing about interstellar politics. Maybe that's exactly why you are perfect for this, Sarah replied. You don't have an agenda, you're just you, an old doctor who's seen too much war and still chooses to heal rather than harm. Before Jack could respond, another knock came at the door. A young lieutenant stood at attention. Doctor, Mason, the transport is ready. It's time. The shuttle ascended through the atmosphere with a gentle persistence that belied its power. Jack sat strapped in a seat designed for astronauts, surrounded by a small team of Earth's hastily assembled diplomatic corps linguists, anthropologists, and military officers, all looking as out of their depth as he felt. General Rhodes sat across from him, his expression thunderous. The career military man had made his objections clear. Sending an elderly doctor as humanity's representative was, in his words, suicidal naivety. But he'd been overruled by powers far above his pay grade. Just remember, Mason, Rhodes had said as the blue of Earth's sky deepened toward the black of space. You make one mistake out there and it's not just your life on the line. It's our entire planet. Jack met his gaze calmly. I've had patients tell me the same thing before surgery, General. Pressure doesn't help steady hands. Before Rhodes could respond, the shuttle pilot's voice came over the intercom. Approaching rendezvous point. Astraeus vessel in visual range. My God. The viewport showed what had prompted the pilot's reaction, an enormous ship that seemed to be made of crystal and silver, its design unlike anything human engineers had conceived. It gleamed in the sunlight, graceful and powerful, making their shuttle look like a crude toy by comparison. But it wasn't alone. Around it orbited a dozen other vessels of varying designs, some angular and aggressive, others organic and flowing, each clearly from different civilizations. A galactic gathering with Earth's tiny shuttle, the most primitive craft in attendance. Those are the other suitors, murmured Dr. Eliza Kwan, the team's xenoanthropologist, representatives from the most powerful civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. The Cathani warriors, Zapirian traders, and those crystalline structures must be from the Architect Conclave. Jack stared out at the assembled fleet, the reality of his situation finally hitting home. He wasn't just meeting aliens, he was stepping into an interstellar political arena where Earth was the least significant player. As their shuttle approached the Astraeus vessel, a communication came through a melodic voice speaking perfect English. Earth vessel, you are cleared for docking in Base 7. Please prepare for gravitational adjustment. The roll reception will commence upon your arrival. The docking procedure was smooth and efficient, the Astraeus technology compensating for the humans' relative inexperience in space maneuvers. When the airlock finally opened, Jack found himself at the front of the Earth delegation, the symbol on his arm seeming to tingle as they stepped into the alien ship. The docking bay was vast and beautiful with soaring crystalline arches and what appeared to be living light pulsing through transparent conduits. Waiting for them was a delegation of Astraeus officials, tall, blue-skinned humanoids with an innate grace to their movements. Their eyes, vertical-pupiled and in shades of blue and purple, regarded the humans with varied expressions of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases barely disguised disdain. At the front stood a dignified Astraeus male in elaborate attire that marked him as a high official. Beside him was the alien Jack had saved, now recovered and dressed in formal medical insignia. The lead Astrea stepped forward. I am Chancellor Valar, Royal Advisor to Emperor Theron of the Astraeus Empire. We welcome Earth's representatives. His eyes fixed on Jack, specifically on the symbol on his forearm, especially the one who bears the mark of truth sight. The alien Jack had treated moved forward and spoke in their melodic language. Though Jack couldn't understand the words, the tone conveyed gratitude. Chancellor Valar listened, then turned back to the humans. Our medical envoy, Talon, tells me you saved his life using methods unknown to our physicians. He says you refused to abandon him when others had given up hope. Valar's eyes, a deep indigo, studied Jack with new intensity. This is consistent with the appearance of the royal mark. Jack stepped forward, feeling the eyes of both delegations upon him. I'm Dr. Jack Mason. I was just doing my job. A murmur ran through the Astraeus delegation at his words. Chancellor Valar's expression shifted subtly, something like respect flickering across his alien features. Your modesty is noted, Dr. Mason. However, bearing the royal mark is not a matter of chance. It appears only when the bearer possesses qualities of exceptional value to our people. He gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the ship. The Emperor awaits. He is eager to meet the human who might change the course of galactic politics. As they walked through the magnificent vessel, Jack became aware of other delegations watching from connecting corridors, representatives from the various ships they'd seen in orbit. Some wore what were clearly military uniforms, others elaborate robes or environmental suits designed for physiologies different from the humanoid Astraeus. Don't stare, General Rhodes muttered from behind him, and for God's sake, don't make promises or agreements without consulting me first. Jack ignored him, his attention caught by a group of particularly imposing aliens, tall, gray-skinned beings with ridge-like features and military bearing. Unlike the others who regarded the humans with curiosity or disdain, these watched with what Jack recognized immediately as hostility. He'd seen that same look in the eyes of enemy combatants, the cold calculation of those considering when and how to strike. Chancellor Valar noticed Jack's observation. The Blackthorn Alliance, he said quietly. Their empire borders ours. They have sent General Krell to offer their crown prince as a suitor. They are disappointed that the princess has agreed to meet with Earth. Why would they care about us? Jack asked. We're hardly a threat to anyone out here. Valar's expression became guarded. It is not always power that threatens Dr. Mason. Sometimes it is ideas. Before Jack could ask what he meant, they arrived at enormous doors, inscribed with symbols similar to the mark on his arm. The doors opened silently, revealing a vast chamber that seemed to capture the essence of stars and nebulae in its architecture. At its center, seated on a throne that appeared to be carved from a single enormous gemstone, was Emperor Theron. He was taller than the other Astraeus, his blue skin deeper in hue, his bearing regal without being stiff. Around him stood courtiers and advisors, all watching the Earth delegation with expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. Chancellor Valar guided them forward, announcing formally, Emperor Theron, I present the delegation from Earth and Dr. Jack Mason, bearer of the royal mark of truth sight. The Emperor regarded Jack with eyes that seemed to contain galaxies, ancient, knowing, and penetrating. When he spoke, his voice carried through the chamber without needing to be raised. So, this is the human who believes he might be worthy of my daughter. The words hung in the air, a challenge and a test. Jack felt General Rhodes tense beside him, ready to intervene with diplomatic platitudes. But Jack stepped forward, instead meeting the Emperor's gaze directly. Your Majesty, I'm here to meet Princess Alara and learn if we might be compatible. I make no assumptions about worthiness. A murmur ran through the court at his words. Most suitors, Jack would later learn, spent their first audience listing their achievements and explaining why they deserved to marry into the royal family. Emperor Theron leaned forward slightly, his interest visibly piqued. Tell me about your species, Dr. Mason. What makes you think you have anything to offer that the Cathani warriors, the Zapirian traders, or the architects could not provide? Jack considered his response carefully. This was clearly another test, and one that would set the tone for humanity's place in this new galactic community. Your Majesty, we don't offer military might, vast wealth, or advanced technology. What we offer is something different. He paused, thinking of Earth's long, painful history, the wars and atrocities, but also the hard-won wisdom that had emerged from them. We offer partnership based on respect and understanding. Explain, the Emperor commanded, his tone revealing nothing. On Earth, we learn that our strength comes not from conquest or domination, but from cooperation. We discovered that different groups working together could achieve more than any single group working alone. Jack thought of his time in combat hospitals, where nationality and ideology meant nothing compared to the shared mission of saving lives. We believe that marriage should be a partnership where both people support each other and grow stronger together. The court officials looked confused. One of them, a thin Astraeus with ceremonial markings on his face, spoke up. But what do you gain from such an arrangement? What resources do you seek? What territory do you wish to acquire? We seek friendship between our peoples, Jack said simply. We hope that by showing respect for Princess Alara and your empire, we might build a relationship that benefits everyone. Emperor Theron leaned forward on his throne. You speak of respect, but you come with no gifts, no fleet, no demonstration of power. How do we know you are not simply too weak to offer anything of real value? Jack thought of Margaret then, of their decades together supporting each other through medical school and military deployments, through raising children and facing illness. Of how their strength had come not from what they possessed, but from what they gave each other. Your Majesty, we believe that the most valuable things cannot be bought or taken by force. Trust, loyalty, love, understanding, these must be freely given by people who choose to share them. The throne room fell silent. Jack could see that many of the aliens present were struggling to understand what he meant. The idea that someone would seek a royal marriage without wanting political gain seemed impossible to them. After a long moment, Emperor Theron spoke. You may meet my daughter, but know this human, she has refused every suitor who has come before you. Many of them were far more powerful than your entire species. I understand, Your Majesty, Jack replied. I only asked for the chance to speak with her. As the Earth delegation was led away, Jack caught sight of General Krell of the Blackthorn Alliance watching him with cold calculation. In that moment, Jack understood that he had just made humanity's first interstellar enemy. The palace gardens were a marvel of xenobotanical engineering plants from dozens of worlds growing together in carefully designed patterns. Some emitted soft light, others moved with apparent sentience, and still others created harmonies when the air passed through them. Jack had been separated from the rest of the Earth delegation, led alone to this peaceful space, while the others were taken to diplomatic quarters. He walked slowly among the alien flora, marveling at the diversity of life forms, all so different, yet existing in perfect balance. In the center of the garden, seated on a simple stone bench, was Princess Alara. Jack had seen images of her in the briefing materials, but they hadn't captured her presence. She possessed the same blue skin, beauty as her people, but there was something more, a quiet strength and a sadness in her eyes that resonated with him immediately. She looked up as he approached, and Jack saw something happen that he hadn't expected. Her eyes widened in genuine surprise, as though she had seen something that defied her expectations. Princess Alara, Jack said, giving a respectful bow. I'm Dr. Jack Mason. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Please sit, she said, gesturing to the bench beside her. Her voice was melodic yet strong. I must ask you something immediately. Is it true that you came here alone with no gifts or demands? It is true. Why? The question seemed to burst out of her as if she couldn't hold it back. Every other suitor has wanted something from my father's empire. Territory, resources, military alliance for conquest. What do you really want? Jack thought carefully about his answer. In this moment, he sensed honesty mattered more than diplomacy. I want to get to know you, he said simply. Not Princess Alara, the political symbol, but you as a person. What you think about, what you care about, what makes you happy or sad. Alara stared at him for a long moment. That is not a political answer. I'm not here for politics. Then why are you here? Jack considered mentioning the strategic interests of Earth, the potential benefits of alliance with an advanced civilization. That's what General Rhodes would have wanted. Instead, he told the truth. Because the reports we received about your situation made it sound like you were trapped by circumstances you did not choose. My people have a saying, no one should have to face their problems alone. I came to see if there was a way we could help. For the first time since Jack had arrived, Princess Alara smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. Help, she repeated, as if the word was foreign to her. When was the last time someone offered to help me instead of asking what they could gain from me? They sat together in the garden for the rest of the afternoon. Jack told her about Earth, about humans who had learned to resolve conflicts through talking, instead of fighting, about the different cultures that had come together to explore space, about the idea that differences between people made them stronger rather than weaker. He told her about his life as a combat medic, about the horrors of war, but also the incredible resilience of the human spirit he'd witnessed. He shared stories about his marriage to Margaret, about raising children who grew to follow their own paths, about the simple pleasures of a life spent helping others. Alara found herself talking more than she had in years. She told Jack about her ability to sense people's true intentions, about the loneliness of knowing that everyone who approached her wanted something other than her friendship, about the pressure she felt to choose a husband, even though all her choices seemed wrong. "It must be difficult," Jack said, "seeing through everyone's pretenses." "You cannot imagine," she replied, a wealth of isolation in those 3 words. 200 suitors, Dr. Mason. 200 beings from across the galaxy, each bringing gifts and making promises. And in every single one, I sensed the same thing: greed, ambition, the desire to use me as a path to power. "And me?" Jack asked quietly. "What do you sense in me?" Alara looked at him with those extraordinary eyes, deep blue with vertical pupils that seemed to see through to his soul. "Nothing," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "For the first time since my ability manifested, I sense no hidden agenda, no secret plan. Just curiosity, compassion, a genuine desire to understand." Jack understood then why the mark had appeared on his arm, why he had been chosen for this impossible mission. In a galaxy of beings seeking advantage, he simply wanted to help. As the day ended and the garden's bioluminescent plants began to glow softly, Jack prepared to return to the diplomatic quarters. "May I visit again tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," Alara said immediately, then more quietly, "Please do." As Jack walked away, Princess Alara sat alone in the garden, thinking about something that had never happened before. For the entire afternoon, her empathic abilities had detected no lies, no hidden agenda, no desire for power or wealth. Instead, she had sensed something that seemed impossible: genuine interest in her as a person. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Jack returned to the palace gardens every day for a week. Each afternoon, he and Princess Alara walked among the alien plants and talked about everything except marriage and politics. They discussed books, music, the beauty of different worlds, and their hopes for the future. For Alara, these conversations were like drinking cool water after years in a desert. Jack asked about her thoughts and feelings, not her royal duties. He listened when she spoke, really listened, instead of waiting for his turn to make demands. When she told him about her empathic abilities, he did not see them as a curse or something to fear. Instead, he seemed to think they were a cure that would help her understand people better. "On Earth," Jack said, as they sat by a fountain shaped like a spiral galaxy, "we have learned that the people who can sense emotions and understand others are often our best leaders. They know when someone is lying, yes, but more importantly, they know when someone is in pain and needs help. Most people see my abilities as a problem," Alara replied. "They say it makes me too picky, too difficult to please. Maybe the problem is not that you sense too much, but that too many people have things to hide." This simple statement hit Alara like a revelation. She had spent years thinking something was wrong with her because she could not ignore people's hidden motives. But what if the problem was with the people who had hidden motives in the first place? On the 8th day, Jack asked the question that Alara had been both hoping for and dreading. "Princess, I would like to formally request your hand in marriage." Alara felt her heart start beating faster. "Tell me your terms." Jack pulled out a document written on simple earth paper. "These are the terms my government has authorized me to offer." Alara read the document, and with each line, her amazement grew. The marriage agreement was unlike anything she had ever seen. First, it stated that Alara would keep all her royal titles and inheritance rights. She would not become property of Earth or lose her position in her father's empire. Second, Earth offered a military alliance, but only for mutual defense. They would help protect the Astraeus Empire if it was attacked, but they would not join in any wars of conquest. Third, and most shocking of all, the agreement included something called a happiness clause. Either party could end the marriage if they were truly unhappy, with no shame or punishment to either side. "I do not understand," Alara said slowly. "What does Earth gain from these terms? You ask for no territory, no resources, no trade advantages. You do not even demand that our marriage be permanent. Jack smiled. We gain the friendship of your people and the opportunity to learn from a civilization much older than ours. We hope to build a relationship based on trust and mutual benefit, not on one side taking advantage of the other. But what if I decide I do not want to be married to you? What if I choose to end our union? Then you would be free to do so and Earth would still honor our friendship with your people. We believe that marriages should exist only as long as both people choose to be together. Alara had to sit down. In all her years of meeting suitors, no one had ever suggested that her happiness mattered more than political gain. Why would you agree to such terms? They give you no security, no guarantee of getting what you want. Princess, what we want is for you to be happy. If you are not happy with me, then I have failed as a husband, and you should not have to stay married to someone who fails you. The document continued with more unusual clauses. The marriage would include a trial period where they could live together and get to know each other better before making a final commitment. Jack would learn Astreus customs and language, while Alara would be welcome to visit Earth and learn about human culture. They would make all major decisions together as equal partners. I need to show this to my father, Alara said, her mind racing with implications. When Emperor Theron read the human marriage proposal, he called an emergency meeting of the Royal Council. The council's chamber filled with the most important officials in the empire, all talking at once about this unprecedented document. This is madness, declared General Tavar, the head of the military. They offer no fleet, no weapons, no soldiers. How does this alliance protect us? They ask for no trade advantages, added Minister Yexal, who managed the empire's commerce. No mining rights, no access to our rare crystals. What kind of species makes such a poor bargain? The happiness clause is completely unacceptable, said High Advisor Keelar. Royal marriages are about duty, not personal feelings. If every royal could end their marriage whenever they felt unhappy, the entire alliance system would collapse. But as the council debated, news of the human proposal spread throughout the palace and beyond. The reaction was unlike anything anyone had expected. Other royal families across the galaxy began sending urgent messages. Princess Valana of the Crystar Empire, who had been forced into an unhappy marriage with a Cathani warlord, sent a secret communication asking if Earth might be interested in offering similar terms to other royal families. Prince Zatan of the Rimworld Coalition, whose bride had been chosen for him based purely on her father's military strength, requested information about human marriage customs. Even more surprising, non-royal nobles began expressing interest. Lady Solana of the Merchant Guilds, who had been rejected by dozens of suitors because of her unusual appearance, sent a formal inquiry about whether humans might consider marriages outside of royal families. Emperor Theron told his daughter privately that her human had started something much larger than a simple marriage proposal. Meanwhile, the powerful species who had sent suitors to court Alara were not pleased with these developments. The Cathani War Marshal sent an angry message declaring that human marriage customs showed cosmic weakness and would lead to the downfall of civilization. The Zepyrian Trade Federation calculated that emotional-based marriages were economically inefficient and would disrupt the careful balance of interspecies commerce. Most concerning of all, the Blackthorn Alliance began moving more ships toward Astrea space. Their leader, Supreme Commander Dracon, sent a message that was barely disguised as diplomacy. The Blackthorn Alliance is concerned that the Astreus Empire may be making alliances with unstable and unreliable species. We feel it is our duty to monitor the situation closely. Emperor Theron understood the threat. The Blackthorn Alliance saw the human proposal as a sign of weakness, and they were preparing to take advantage of what they perceived as a vulnerable moment. My daughter, he said to Alara, as they stood in his private study, I believe this human truly cares for you, and his proposal is more generous than anything we could have hoped for. But accepting it may put our entire empire at risk. The Blackthorn is looking for any excuse to attack us, and they see this unusual alliance as a sign that we have become weak. Ilara looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Blackthorn fleet was growing larger and moving closer. The choice she made about marriage might determine whether her people lived in peace or died in war. What do you think I should do? She asked. Her father was quiet for a long time. I think you should follow your heart, but be prepared for the consequences. If you choose the human, we may have to fight for the right to make that choice. That night, Alara walked alone in the garden where she had spent so many hours talking with Jack. Tomorrow she would give him her answer. She could choose safety by rejecting his proposal and accepting one of the more traditional suitors. Or she could choose hope by accepting Jack and trusting that their unusual alliance might be strong enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she stood among the alien flowers under the light of 3 moons, Princess Alara made her decision. For the first time in her life, she would choose what her heart wanted instead of what others expected her to want. The consequences would come tomorrow. Tonight, she would simply be happy that someone in the vast galaxy had finally seen her as more than a political prize to be won. The next morning, as Jack waited in the diplomatic quarters for news of Alara's decision, an urgent message arrived. The Galactic Council, the governing body that maintained peace between the major civilizations, had called an emergency session. Representatives from a dozen powerful species were converging on Astraeus, demanding that the human proposal be reviewed for its potential impact on galactic stability. And with them came a challenge that would test Jack more severely than anything in his long career of facing death and making impossible choices. The council demanded that Jack undergo the trial of bonds, an ancient test that pushed suitors to their absolute limits. Many had tried it over the centuries. Most had failed, some had died. The Galactic Council's chamber hung suspended in space, a vast transparent dome where representatives from the most powerful civilizations gathered. Jack stood at its center alone on a platform that seemed to float above an abyss of stars. Around him, tiered seating rose in concentric circles filled with beings of every conceivable form, some humanoid, others utterly alien in their construction. Speaker Malor, a tall, gray-skinned being with 6 arms and eyes that seemed to shift color with his mood, addressed the assembly from a raised dais. His voice carried effortlessly through the chamber without apparent technological assistance. We convene this emergency session to address a matter of unprecedented significance. The marriage proposal offered by the species called humans threatens the stability of our alliance system. Several member species have declared formal objections. Jack stood straight back despite the ache in his knees. After decades of military service, he knew how to maintain dignity under scrutiny. The mark on his arm seemed to pulse slightly as though responding to the tension in the chamber. Emperor Theron rose from his seat among the Astraeus delegation. What complaints could possibly warrant council intervention in a sovereign matter of royal succession? Speaker Malor's eyes shifted to a cold blue. The Cathani Empire claims that human marriage customs show dangerous weakness. The Zephyrian Trade Federation argues that emotional-based alliances will disrupt economic stability. His gaze settled on a section of the chamber where gray-uniformed delegates sat in rigid formation. The Blackthorn Alliance insists that your empire has been compromised by alien influence. Jack recognized the calculated strategy. The Blackthorn weren't merely objecting to the marriage, they were using it as a pretext to question the Astraeus Empire's autonomy and perhaps justify future aggression. He stepped forward. Speaker Malor, my people mean no threat to the Galactic Alliance system. We simply wish to form a partnership based on mutual respect. That is what we are here to determine, the speaker replied. The council demands that the human representative undergo the trial of bonds. If he passes, his proposal will be accepted. If he fails, the marriage will be forbidden and Earth will be banned from making future royal marriage requests. From her place beside her, Father Ilara rose in protest. The trial is not required by law. I have the right to choose my own husband. Under normal circumstances, yes. Speaker Malor said, his tone softening slightly when addressing the princess. But when a marriage proposal threatens galactic stability, the council has the authority to intervene. The trial will begin tomorrow. The hologram disappeared, leaving the throne room in tense silence. Ilara moved quickly to Jack's side, her face tight with concern. You do not have to do this, she said urgently. We can find another way. Jack studied her face, the determination in her eyes, the genuine worry in her expression. He thought of the Blackthorn ships gathering at the borders of the fear this simple marriage proposal had stirred across the galaxy. Something much larger than their personal happiness was at stake. No, he said with a quiet resolve. I'll take the trial. If passing it is what it takes to prove that humans are worthy of trust, then that's what I'll do. As the chamber emptied, General Krell of the Blackthorn Alliance approached. His gray skin seemed almost metallic under the chamber lights, his eyes cold and calculating as they fixed on Jack. A bold decision, human, he said, his voice carrying the artificial smoothness of one accustomed to deception. But the trial of bonds has broken beings far more evolved than yourself. It would be simpler to withdraw your proposal now. Return to your primitive world with dignity intact. Jack met his gaze steadily. I spent my career patching up soldiers who refused to abandon their posts, General. I'm not about to abandon mine. Krell's expression hardened. Your species does not understand galactic politics. What you propose is not merely a marriage, it is a revolution against a system that has maintained order for millennia. He leaned closer, dropping his voice. Order that benefits those strong enough to enforce it. Maybe that system needs challenging, Jack replied evenly. The general's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile on a human face. Perhaps I should thank you, Mason. Your inevitable failure tomorrow will give the Blackthorn Alliance the justification we need to establish a more direct presence in Astreus affairs. With that threat lingering in the air, Krell turned and strode away, his military bearing, perfect even in retreat. The night before the trial, Jack stood alone on the balcony of his quarters, gazing at unfamiliar constellations. The enormity of tomorrow's challenge weighed on him. According to the information Alara had shared, no one in living memory had passed all 3 trials. The door slid open behind him, and Alara stepped out onto the balcony. She wore simpler clothing than her usual royal attire, making her look younger, more vulnerable. I should not be here, she said softly. It is forbidden for suitors to meet privately with the princess before the trial. Then why come? Jack asked. Because I needed to see you. To explain. She moved beside him at the railing, her gaze following his to the stars. The trial was created in ancient times when our empires were young, and marriage alliances often led to betrayal and war. It tests the true character of a suitor under extreme pressure. And what exactly does it involve? Alara hesitated. 3 challenges. The trial of greed tests whether you can resist temptation. The trial of fear tests your courage in the face of threats. And the trial of sacrifice. Her voice faltered. That one has never been passed. It forces an impossible choice. Jack nodded slowly. I've faced impossible choices before. This is different, Alara insisted. The trial uses technology that creates perfect illusions. Your mind will believe everything it experiences is real. Many have gone mad from the trauma. Jack turned to face her, taking in the genuine concern in her eyes. During the Gulf War, I worked in a field hospital outside Kuwait City. One night we lost power during a major offensive. I had to perform emergency surgery on a boy no more than 18 with nothing but a flashlight and basic supplies. His voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed the weight of the memory. He lived. Sometimes our greatest strengths emerge when we have no other choice. Alara studied him, her empathic abilities sensing the deep well of experiences behind his words. You have seen much suffering. And much healing, Jack corrected gently. In war, you witness humanity at its worst, but also at its best. People making impossible sacrifices for others, finding strength they never knew they had. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the symbol on his forearm. When this appeared, I knew you were different. But I never expected that an old doctor from a backwater planet would volunteer to face an ancient alien trial. Jack smiled wryly. That I would care so much whether you lived or died, Alara finished softly. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Jack felt a connection with this alien princess that defied explanation, a recognition of kindred spirits, separated by vast gulfs of space-time and biology, yet somehow finding common ground. I'll pass the trial, Jack promised. Not for Earth or for politics, but for you. For the right to choose your own path. As Alara left, Jack returned to his contemplation of the stars. Tomorrow would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. But tonight he found himself thinking of Margaret and the quiet courage she had shown facing her cancer diagnosis years ago. We face what comes, she had told him. One day at a time with whatever strength we have. He would need all that strength tomorrow. The trial of bonds took place on a neutral space station that belonged to the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species came to watch along with millions more who viewed the proceedings through holographic broadcasts across the galaxy. Jack stood in the center of a vast chamber wearing simple clothes and carrying no weapons. Around him, the council had set up 3 tests designed to reveal his true character under extreme pressure. Chancellor Villar approached him before the trial began. Mason, I must warn you, the trial creates illusions so perfect that your mind will accept them as reality. Your reactions must be genuine to pass. Jack nodded. I understand. Many have died rather than make the choices presented in the 3rd trial, Villar added gravely. There is no dishonor in refusing to continue after the 2nd trial. I'll see it through, Jack replied simply. Speaker Maylor's voice resonated through the chamber. Let the trial of bonds begin. The chamber darkened and Jack felt a strange sensation wash over him, like falling while standing still. When light returned, he was no longer in the trial chamber. The first test, the trial of greed, had begun. Jack found himself standing in a vault filled with more wealth than he had ever imagined. Gold, silver, rare crystals, and precious artifacts from 100 worlds were piled higher than buildings. The riches of entire star systems surrounded him, glittering in soft light. A figure that looked exactly like Emperor Theron appeared beside him. Take whatever you want, the false emperor said. Fill your ship with treasure. All I ask in return is that you leave my daughter alone and never return to our world. Jack looked at the incredible wealth surrounding him. With just a small portion of these riches, he could solve every economic problem on Earth. His people would never want for anything again. Medical research could be funded beyond imagination, diseases conquered, lifespans extended. The temptation was powerful and immediate, but he also thought about Alara sitting alone in her garden, believing once again that no one would ever care about her for who she truly was. He thought about the soldiers he'd treated in war, young men who'd sold their youth and often their lives for military paychecks, in the war profiteers who'd grown fat on their sacrifices. I don't want your treasure, Jack said to the false emperor. I want your daughter to be happy. You fool! The illusion snarled, its friendly demeanor vanishing. You could be the richest human who ever lived. Think of what this wealth could do for your primitive world. Jack remained unmoved. What good is wealth if it comes from betraying someone I care about? I've seen men sell their souls for far less than this. Not one of them died happy. The illusion of Emperor Theron dissolved and in the mountains of treasure faded away. Jack found himself back in the trial chamber, the audience murmuring in surprise. Most species valued wealth above almost everything else. A Suitor who would refuse unlimited riches was almost unheard of. Speaker Maylor's voice echoed through the chamber. The trial of greed is complete. The human has passed. Without pause, the chamber darkened again. The trial of fear had begun. This time the illusion showed Jack standing on the bridge of a human starship. Through the windows, he could see a massive alien fleet surrounding Earth. The ships were dark and threatening, their weapons aimed at his homeworld. A figure wearing the uniform of a Blackthorn admiral appeared on the main screen. Human, the false admiral said, your planet has been chosen for destruction, but we are willing to make a deal. Abandon your foolish marriage proposal and convince your people to never interfere in galactic politics again. Do this and we will spare your world. Jack watched the weapons charging on the alien ships. Earth had almost no military compared to the great galactic powers. If this threat was real, his home world would be helpless. But Jack had studied Earth history. He knew that giving in to threats only led to more threats. The appeasement of tyrants had never succeeded from Hitler. To Hussein, the lesson was the same. If he abandoned Alara now to save Earth, the same bullies would just make bigger demands later. He thought of Colonel Harris's words before he left Earth. You're representing our entire species. Wow. What message would capitulation send about humanity? I won't abandon my friends to save myself or my world, Jack said firmly. If you want to attack Earth, that's your choice. But you'll do it knowing that humans don't betray the people they care about, and we don't kneel to threats. The illusion of the Blackthorn admiral regarded him with cold calculation. Your primitive species clearly doesn't understand self-preservation. Perhaps extinction is the natural outcome for such foolishness. Perhaps, Jack agreed calmly. Or perhaps there's strength in standing by your principles even when it's difficult. That's something my primitive species figured out a long time ago. The second test ended, and the murmuring around the chamber grew louder. The watching aliens were beginning to realize that humans might think very differently than they had expected. Speaker Malor announced, "The trial of fear is complete. The human has passed." The chamber fell silent as the final test prepared to begin. This was the trial of sacrifice, the one Alara had said no one had ever passed. Jack steeled himself, knowing that whatever came next would test him to his limits. The darkness returned, and when it lifted, Jack found himself standing in the corridor of a damaged starship that was breaking apart. Emergency lights flashed red and alarm blared throughout the vessel. Through a window, he could see Alara trapped in one section of the ship. In another section, he could see a group of alien civilians, women, men, and children from several different species also trapped and in danger. The ship's computer spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. "Critical system failure. You have time to save only one group before the ship explodes. Choose." Jack stared at the impossible choice. Save the woman he had come to care for deeply, or save innocent people he had never met. Either choice would mean watching others die. But as he looked at the situation, Jack began to think like the combat medic. He had been assessing resources, analyzing options, refusing to accept the parameters as given. In triage, you didn't choose who died. You found ways to maximize survivors with limited resources. He ran to the ship's engineering section and began pulling apart control panels. He had studied starship design during his journey to meet Alara. Most ships had emergency systems that could be rerouted in creative ways. Working faster than he ever had in his life, Jack rewired the ship's power grid. Instead of using the remaining energy to save one section, he redirected it to strengthen the structural integrity of both sections just long enough for rescue ships to arrive. The ship's computer voice returned. "Warning: unauthorized modification of critical systems. This action risks complete structural failure." "Sometimes you have to increase risk to one to save many," Jack muttered, thinking of battlefield medicine principles as he worked. Standard triage protocol: maximize survival even at increased risk. As he completed the final connection, the ship shuddered violently. For a moment it seemed his gamble had failed. Then the emergency force fields stabilized, holding both sections intact. When the illusion faded, the trial chamber was completely silent. In the thousands of years that the trial of bonds had existed, no one had ever found a way to pass the trial of sacrifice without choosing who to save. Jack had done something that the council had thought was impossible. Speaker Malor's voice, when it finally came, carried a note of genuine astonishment. "The human has passed all three trials. More than that, he has shown us new ways of thinking about old problems." The assembled dignitaries erupted in conversation. Some appeared disturbed, others intrigued. The Blackthorn delegation sat in stony silence, their plans clearly disrupted. But the most important reaction came from Princess Alara, who had been using her empathic abilities to sense the emotions of everyone watching the trial. She approached Jack as the council formally announced his success. "Jack," she said when they were alone afterward, "do you know what I sensed from the other species during your trial?" "What did you sense?" he asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. The trials had taken their toll, leaving him drained physically and emotionally. "Fear. Not fear of you, but fear of what you represent. They're afraid of humans because you don't think the way they do. When they see a problem with two bad solutions, they accept that one of the bad solutions must be chosen. But humans look for third options that no one else considers." Jack thought about this. "Is that why they wanted me to take the trial, to see if we really think differently?" "I think so." Alara nodded. "And now they know that humans can find solutions that other species can't imagine. Some of them see that as a threat to the way things have always been done." Her expression grew concerned. "The Blackthorn Alliance is already sending messages to their fleet. They won't accept this outcome peacefully." Jack took her hands in his. They were different in color and form, but the connection between them transcended physical differences. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The royal chambers were in turmoil. Emperor Theron had called an emergency meeting with his military advisors, Jack and Alara present. Holographic displays showed the movement of Blackthorn ships toward Astraeus territory. "They're positioning for a strike," General Tavar said grimly, his blue fingers manipulating the tactical display. "Supreme Commander Dracon has recalled all diplomatic personnel from our worlds. That's typically the final step before hostilities." Emperor Theron looked troubled. "Even with our defenses, we cannot match the Blackthorn fleet directly." They've been building their military for decades while we focused on culture and commerce. What about the Galactic Council? Jack asked. Won't they intervene to prevent war? Chancellor Velar shook his head. The Council maintains peace through balance of power, not direct intervention. If the Blackthorn claim they're acting to prevent a greater disruption to galactic order, the Council will hesitate. Jack studied the tactical display memories of military briefings from his combat days surfacing. You're planning for a defensive action, preparing to repel their fleet when they arrive. General Tavar nodded. It's our only option. No, Jack said firmly. There's another way. He moved to the display, fingers tracing potential movement patterns. You're thinking in terms of traditional military response, but that's exactly what they expect. What if instead of preparing to fight the Blackthorn directly, we expand our alliance? With whom? Emperor Theron asked skeptically. Most powers will align with the stronger side in any conflict. With everyone who's been oppressed by the current system, Jack replied. The royal families forced into unhappy marriages. The worlds that can't match Blackthorn militarily but resent their influence. All those who sent messages after our marriage proposal became known. Alara's eyes widened in understanding. You want to create a coalition based on our new approach to alliances. Jack nodded. The Blackthorn's power comes from fear and tradition. But you've seen how many responded positively to our marriage terms. There's a hunger for change across the galaxy. Emperor Theron considered this. It's a dangerous gamble. If we reach out and others refuse to join us, we'll have revealed our weakness and hastened our defeat. Sometimes the greatest risk is taking no risk at all, Jack replied. In the Gulf War, I learned that victory doesn't always come from having the bigger guns. Sometimes it comes from having the stronger alliance and the moral high ground. After hours of debate, Emperor Theron made his decision. Emergency transmissions were sent to dozens of worlds, not with pleas for military aid, but with offers of new kinds of alliances based on mutual respect and self-determination. The response exceeded even Jack's most optimistic predictions. Within hours, ships began arriving from worlds across the galaxy, some military vessels, others diplomatic crafts. Representatives from royal families who had been watching the trial of bonds with intense interest came forward to offer support. Princess Valana of the Crystar Empire arrived with 3 battlecruisers, having fled her unhappy marriage to the Cathani warlord. Your humans showed us that there are alternatives to suffering and silence, she told Alara. My people stand with you. Prince Zeton of the Rimworld Coalition brought a fleet of sleek, fast attack craft. For generations, we've endured marriages that served politics but destroyed lives. If the Blackthorn want war over this, they'll fight us all. Even more surprising were the vessels that arrived from worlds within the Blackthorn Alliance itself, border planets, and satellite states that had chafed under Dracon's rule. They came not with large warships, but with supply vessels, medical ships, and civilian transports converted for defense. As Jack watched the gathering alliance from the observation deck of the Royal Palace, Alara joined him. You've changed everything, she said softly. In 1 week, you've reshaped alliances that stood for millennia. I just offered an alternative, Jack replied. Everyone else chose to embrace it. The Blackthorn fleet will still come, she reminded him. They have more firepower than all our allies combined. Jack nodded, his expression solemn but determined. Then we'll need to fight differently. He turned to her. Your people have advanced medical technology, right? Sophisticated biotech neural interfaces, targeted delivery systems. Yes, of course. Why? A plan was forming in Jack's mind, one that drew on his medical knowledge rather than military strategy. Because I think I know how we can win this war without destroying our enemy, and that will be the greatest victory of all. As the Blackthorn fleet approached, Jack met with the medical officers from all allied species. Using his expertise as a combat medic, he proposed a radical strategy, developing a non-lethal neurological inhibitor that could be dispersed through the Blackthorn ship's air filtration systems. In war, I learned that killing your enemy is easy, he told the assembled medical team. Saving lives on both sides, that's the real challenge. And the true victory. Many were skeptical, especially those from warrior cultures. But Jack's success in the trial of bonds had earned him respect, and Alara's support carried significant weight. They worked through the night, combining Astreus biotechnology with medical techniques from a dozen worlds. Jack drew on every bit of his medical knowledge adapting battlefield triage principles to this impossible scenario. The goal isn't to harm them, he explained as they calibrated the compound, just to incapacitate long enough to prevent aggression. No permanent damage. As dawn broke over the Astreus capital, sensors detected the Blackthorn fleet entering the system. Dozens of massive warships, each bristling with weapons that could reduce cities to ash. Supreme Commander Dracon's image appeared on communication screens across the planet. His gray features were set in cold determination. The Astreus Empire has violated the fundamental principles of galactic order, he announced. Your acceptance of primitive human customs threatens the stability upon which all civilized species depend. Surrender Princess Alara and the human called Jack Mason for proper re-education, and your world will be spared. Emperor Theron stood before the transmission, his bearing regal, despite the threat. The Astreus Empire has chosen a new path, one of self-determination and mutual respect. We do not stand alone in this choice. Look around you, Commander. The Emperor gestured and the transmission widened to show the assembled Allied fleet vessels from dozens of worlds forming a protective ring around Astreus. Not as powerful as the Blackthorn Armada, but far more numerous than Dracon had expected. This is your last warning, Dracon replied, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. Disperse this illegal gathering and surrender the principles. We will not, Emperor Theron said simply. For too long, we have accepted a system that valued power over happiness, control over cooperation. No more. The transmission ended, and all knew that battle was imminent. Jack stood on the command deck beside Alara, watching as the Blackthorn ships moved into attack formation. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Jack thought about all the battles he'd seen, all the wounded he'd treated, all the death he'd witnessed. Yes, he admitted, but not of dying. I'm afraid of failing, of letting all these people who've risked everything for a better way of life down. Alara took his hand, her blue fingers interlacing with his. Whatever happens, you've already succeeded. You've shown us that there are alternatives to the way things have always been. That alone is a victory worth fighting for. As the first Blackthorn weapons powered up, Jack squeezed her hand. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The first barrage from the Blackthorn fleet illuminated the darkness of space like artificial lightning. Their weapons evolved from centuries of warfare, struck the outer defensive shields of Astreus with enough force to make the entire planetary protection grid flicker momentarily. On the command deck, officers braced against consoles as the vibrations reached even the palace. Jack studied the tactical displays with the focused calm he'd developed in combat hospitals. The Allied fleet moved into defensive formations, their ships smaller but more numerous than the Blackthorn Armada. It wouldn't be enough for a conventional victory. The firepower disparity was too great, but conventional victory wasn't Jack's plan. Status of the medical transports, he asked, turning to the communications officer. Moving into position behind our defensive line, the blue-skinned Astreus replied. All 15 vessels report the compound is ready for deployment. Emperor Theron approached his regal bearing unchanged despite the crisis. Dr. Mason, your strategy places our medical ships at extreme risk. They're not designed for combat, which is why the Blackthorn won't expect them to be our primary weapon, Jack replied. In triage, we use what we have, not what we wish we had. The Emperor studied him for a moment before nodding. You risked your life in the trial for my daughter's freedom. Now you risk it again for my people. Earth has sent us its finest representative. Another impact rocked the command center. General Tavar called out from the primary tactical station. Their main fleet is pushing through Sector 7. Our defenses can't hold that position much longer. Jack moved to the communications array. This is Dr. Mason to all medical vessels. Begin Operation Morpheus now. Combat ships create openings as planned. Across the battlefield, the Allied fleet executed a series of seemingly chaotic maneuvers. To an observer, it might have looked like panic ships breaking formation, defensive lines collapsing. The Blackthorn commanders trained in conventional warfare saw exactly what they expected, a weaker force beginning to crumble. Their capital ships pressed forward, targeting the apparent weak points. But hidden within this choreographed disorder, the medical ships slipped through precise gaps, each protected by minimal escorts that drew enemy fire away from them. Tivar status, Emperor Theron demanded. 3 medical ships lost, the general reported grimly. But 11 have reached deployment range. Blackthorn fleet is penetrating our defensive perimeter, exactly as Dr. Mason predicted. Jack watched the holographic display, his expression tense but determined. Each glowing dot represented lives, both the allies he'd convinced to follow this plan and the Blackthorn personnel he was trying to incapacitate rather than kill. The weight of those lives pressed on him just as heavily as any patient he'd treated on a battlefield. First deployment underway, reported the science officer. Compound is entering the ventilation systems of the Blackthorn forward fleet. Now came the most critical phase, the waiting. Jack had adapted the neural inhibitor using his knowledge of human physiology, but it had been modified with Astraeus biotechnology to affect the Blackthorn nervous system. If it worked as designed, it would render ship personnel unconscious without permanent harm. If not, Blackthorn vessels showing erratic movement and patterns. General Tavar announced, a note of surprise in his voice. Weapon systems on their forward destroyers are powering down. A cheer began to rise from the command staff, but Jack raised his hand. Wait, we need confirmation of effects before. The view screen flashed with a priority communication. Supreme Commander Dracon's face appeared, his gray features contorted with rage. This treachery will not stand, Theron. You attack my people with biological weapons. Emperor Theron stepped forward. Not weapons, Commander. What has been? Your crews will wake unharmed in approximately 6 hours. Unlike your weapons, ours are designed to preserve life. Dracon's expression shifted to something Jack recognized from countless battlefield encounters, the dawning realization that an enemy had outmaneuvered you completely. You think this ends here, Dracon growled. My flagship remains unaffected by your trickery. I still have enough firepower to reduce your palace to ash. Jack moved into view of the transmission. Then you'll be remembered as the commander who massacred civilians rather than accept that times change. Is that the legacy you want, Commander? Dracon's eyes narrowed as they fixed on Jack. The human doctor who plays at warfare. You don't understand our galaxy primitive. Our system has maintained order for millennia. Order for whom? Jack challenged. For the powerful, for those born into the right families. What about everyone else? He gestured to the command deck around him, where representatives from a dozen allied worlds stood united. Look around you, Commander. This isn't just Astraeus fighting. It's everyone who's been waiting for an alternative to your kind of order. The Blackthorn commander's face hardened. And you think you've provided that alternative A system based on sentiment and personal happiness, rather than strength. A system based on choice, Jack corrected. On mutual benefit rather than exploitation. On the radical idea that people should be able to determine their own futures. For a moment, something flashed across Dracon's features, an emotion Jack couldn't quite identify. Then the commander's voice came lower than before. My flagship still approaches your capital. You have 10 minutes to surrender the human and the princess, or I will demonstrate what happens to those who challenge the natural order. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. General Tavar turned to Emperor Theron. The flagship's shields are too powerful for our remaining medical transports to penetrate, and our combat vessels can't break through in time to stop them from reaching weapons range of the palace. Jack studied the tactical display, noting the massive Blackthorn flagship moving steadily toward them, its escort vessels drifting powerless in its wake. A plan formed in his mind, one that drew on everything he'd learned in field medicine about taking calculated risks. I need a small craft, he said suddenly, something fast and maneuverable. Alara, who had been coordinating communications with their allies, turned to him with sudden concern. What are you planning? Their flagship is still running life support and filtration systems, Jack explained. We just need to get the compound closer inside their defensive perimeter. That's suicide, General Tavar stated flatly. No ship could get close enough without being destroyed. Jack's mind flashed back to a dust storm outside Kuwait City, to a young medic racing across open ground under enemy fire to reach wounded soldiers. Sometimes survival meant taking the path everyone else considered impossible. I don't need to survive the approach, he said quietly. I just need to get close enough to deploy the compound. Emperor Theron understood immediately. You propose to sacrifice yourself. Alara stepped forward, her voice sharp with emotion. No, After everything you've done, everything you've proven, you can't just throw your life away. Jack turned to her, taking in every detail of her face, alien, yet so familiar now. In war, I learned that sometimes one life can save thousands. It's not throwing my life away if it means something. There must be another way, she insisted, her empathic abilities picking up his determination with growing distress. Jack thought for a moment, his doctor's mind racing through alternatives. Then he remembered his third trial, how he had refused to accept the parameters as given, how he had found the third option when presented with an impossible choice. Maybe there is, he said slowly. General, do you have medical teleportation technology for emergency transport of critical patients? Tavar looked puzzled. Yes, but it requires precisely calibrated receiving stations. It can't be used as a weapon. I don't want to use it as a weapon, Jack replied. I want to use it as a delivery system. He moved to the tactical display, fingers tracing the outline of the Blackthorn flagship. If we can get the compound into their central filtration system directly, we won't need to breach their shields with a ship. But our teleportation range is limited, the general objected. We'd need to be practically inside their defensive perimeter. Then I still go, Jack decided, but in a medical ship with teleportation capability. I get as close as I can, beam the compound aboard, and try to get out. He looked at Alara. It's still dangerous, but it's not a suicide mission. Emperor Theron studied him with newfound respect. Always the third option with you, isn't it, human? It's what we do best, Jack replied with a grim smile. The small medical transport slipped away from the Astraeus defensive line, its minimal weapons power, making it register as barely a threat on Blackthorn scanners. Jack sat at the controls, his decades-old pilot training from medical evacuation missions coming back with surprising clarity. Beside him, against all protocols and direct orders, sat Princess Alara. She had refused to remain behind her royal authority, overriding all objections. If we survive this, Jack said, as they accelerated toward the massive Blackthorn flagship, your father is going to have some choice words for both of us. If we survive this, Alara replied, I don't think he'll mind too much. The flagship loomed larger in their viewport, a behemoth of weaponry and armor designed to inspire fear. Warning shots flashed past their small vessel, deliberately missing, but sending a clear message. They're tracking us, Jack noted, making minute adjustments to their approach vector. But they're not taking us seriously yet, just as we hoped. The medical transport carried minimal defensive shielding, redirecting most of its power to the specialized teleportation system in the rear compartment. Their containers of the neural inhibitor compound waited, calibrated for the Blackthorn physiology and ready for transport. Dracon's voice crackled through their communication system. Medical vessel, you are entering restricted space. Reverse course immediately or be destroyed. Jack toggled the response channel. Blackthorn flagship, this is Dr. Jack Mason. I'm coming aboard to discuss terms of surrender. Princess Alara accompanies me as requested. A pause, then Dracon's voice returned, heavy with suspicion. You expect me to believe you're surrendering after your speech about choice and freedom? I'm a doctor, Jack replied simply. I've seen enough death. If surrendering prevents more bloodshed, then that's what I'll do. Another pause, longer this time. Jack could almost see the Blackthorn commander weighing his options, wondering if this was a trap, but also calculating the propaganda value of having the troublesome human and the princess surrender personally. Approach Docking Bay 4, came the eventual response. Any deviation from the assigned course will result in immediate destruction. Jack cut the transmission and exchanged a look with Alara. He's bringing us in close, exactly what we need. He does not believe you are actually surrendering. Alara observed, her empathic abilities stretching toward the flagship. Of course not, Jack agreed, making minute adjustments to their course. But he can't resist the opportunity to capture us both. Pride is a weakness on any world. As they approached the massive vessel, its weapons trained on their small craft, Jack activated the teleportation system's targeting protocols. The medical transport sensors mapped the Blackthorn flagship's ventilation infrastructure, identifying the central hub where air circulation was managed for the entire ship. Range to teleportation, effective zone 30 seconds, the computer announced. Jack turned to Alara. When we deploy the compound, they'll know immediately what we've done. We'll have seconds to get away before they open fire. She nodded, her face set with determination. I understand the risk. 20 seconds to range. Jack thought of all the impossible evacuations he'd performed in combat zones of patients rescued from beneath collapsing buildings and through enemy territory. This was just another extraction under fire. 10 seconds. Lock target, Jack commanded. The computer beeped confirmation as it fixed on the filtration hub deep within the Blackthorn vessel. 5 seconds. Jack's hand hovered over the activation control. Alara placed her blue-tinged hand over his. Together they pressed the control. Teleportation initiated, the computer announced as the containers of neural inhibitor vanished in a shimmer of energy. Jack immediately reversed thrust, banking the small craft away from the flagship in a maneuver that would have been reckless under any other circumstances. Warning signals flared across the control panel as the medical transport's engines strained beyond safety parameters. On the flagship, alarms would be sounding as sensors detected the foreign substance entering the ventilation system. Jack could imagine the frantic orders, the attempts to isolate affected sections, the weapons officers targeting their fleeing craft. The first energy blast from the flagship scorched past their port side close enough that the shields flared bright blue with the effort of deflection. "They're firing!" Alara called, unnecessarily gripping her seat as Jack executed another evasive maneuver. "Just need to keep them busy for another 2 minutes." Jack replied, his focus absolute, as he pushed the small vessel beyond its design limitations. "That's how long before the compound reaches the bridge." Another blast, this one grazing their stern shields. Warning lights flashed as power fluctuated throughout the vessel. "Shields at 40%, the computer announced calmly. A third blast struck directly, sending cascading energy through the ship's systems. Control panels sparked and emergency lighting activated as primary power faltered. "Shields critical. Engine power reduced to 60%. Jack felt the familiar calm of combat descend over him, the strange clarity that came in moments of extreme danger. His hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, extracting every bit of performance from the damaged systems. "One more minute," he told Alara, who was using emergency protocols to reroute power from non-essential systems to shields and engines. The Blackthorn flagship launched another barrage, but the shots were already less precise, the targeting systems affected by the beginning stages of the compound's dispersal. Bridge crew would be experiencing the first symptoms: dizziness, slowed reactions, impaired judgment. "They're losing coordination," Alara observed, watching the increasingly erratic weapons fire. A final shot grazed their vessel, sending it into a spin that Jack fought to control with damaged thrusters. As they stabilized, he checked the chronometer. Compound should be reaching full effect now. On the tactical display, the weapon systems of the Blackthorn flagship powered down. The massive vessel continued on its previous course through sheer momentum, but its lights dimmed as emergency systems engaged. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We did it." Alara reached across and took his hand. "We did it." Their small, damaged craft limped back toward the Astraeus defense perimeter, where Allied vessels were already moving to secure the drifting Blackthorn ships. On the main flagship, only life support and minimal systems remained active enough to keep the crew alive, but unconscious until boarding parties could reach them. "I want to be there when Dracon wakes up," Jack said, as they approached the Royal Palace's docking bay. "Someone should explain to him what happened, and why." 6 hours later, Jack stood in the detention chamber where Supreme Commander Dracon was regaining consciousness. The Blackthorn leader lay on a medical bed, restraints securing him as a precaution, though the after effects of the compound would leave him weakened for several more hours. Dracon's eyes, cold gray with vertical pupils, focused on Jack with immediate recognition and hatred. "You should have killed me, human." "That would have been easier," Jack acknowledged, checking the commander's vital signs with professional detachment. "But I didn't become a doctor to take lives, even when it might seem justified." "My fleet is secure," Jack finished for him. "Your crews are being treated with the same care you're receiving. No one has died today." Dracon's expression shifted to confusion. "Why, you had the opportunity to eliminate your greatest threat. Any rational species would have seized it." Jack pulled up a chair beside the bed. "In war, I learned something that might surprise you. Killing your enemy is easy. Living with them afterward, that's the real challenge." "You speak of war as if you understand it," Dracon scoffed. "Your primitive species has barely mastered interplanetary travel. We've mastered killing each other quite efficiently." Jack replied with grim humor. But we've also learned something from our bloodiest conflicts, that true victory isn't found in the enemy's defeat, but in what comes after, in whether peace endures. For a moment, Draken was silent, studying Jack with calculation. Then he spoke more quietly. Do you know why the Blackthorn Alliance has dominated this sector for centuries? Human fear, Jack suggested. Military superiority, willingness to use force. Certainty, Dracon corrected. Absolute certainty in our way of life. In the natural order of strong over weak, of discipline over sentiment. His eyes narrowed. Your ideas of choice of happiness over duty, they are a cancer that will destroy everything we've built. Or transform it into something better, Jack countered. Something that serves all beings, not just those born to power. Before Dracon could respond, the door opened and Princess Alara entered with Emperor Theron. The Blackthorn commander's face hardened again, Ponmade reasserting itself in the presence of his royal captors. Emperor Theron regarded the fallen commander with complicated emotions, victory tempered by awareness of how close they had come to destruction. The Galactic Council has convened an emergency session, the Emperor informed Dracon. Your actions launching an unprovoked attack against multiple civilizations have been condemned unanimously. The Council is weak, Dracon spat. They've always feared our strength. Perhaps, Theron acknowledged, but they've authorized a peacekeeping force to oversee the reorganization of Blackthorn territory. Your subject worlds are already declaring independence or forming new alliances, many of them based on the human model. This news seemed to affect Dracon more than his capture. His face showed genuine shock, followed by something Jack recognized from countless patients' grief. Everything we built, destroyed by sentiment and weakness. Jack studied the commander with professional interest. You truly believe that, don't you? That allowing people to choose their own path is weakness? I know it is, Dracon replied with a conviction. I've seen what happens when order breaks down, when emotion governs instead of strength. My homeworld was torn apart by such foolishness before the Alliance restored discipline. Jack recognized trauma when he saw it, the kind that shaped entire worldviews. And you've spent your life ensuring it never happens again, by imposing your order on everyone else. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed across Dracon's features. Then his military bearing reasserted itself. Mock me if you wish, human. History will prove me right when your new system collapses into chaos. Perhaps, Jack acknowledged, every system eventually changes, but I'd rather build one based on compassion than fear. He stepped closer to the bed. You know what surprised me most about the trial of bonds? That no one had ever passed the third test because no one had ever refused to choose between lives. They always accepted the parameters as given. Because there are always hard choices, Dracon insisted. Pretending otherwise is childish fantasy. Or it's the wisdom to look beyond false dichotomies, Jack countered, to find solutions that preserve what's valuable rather than sacrificing it on the altar of tradition. Emperor Theron placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. The Galactic Council has requested your presence, Dr. Mason. They wish to discuss the implications of its events and the future of interspecies relations. Jack nodded, giving Dracon one last look. Think about this while you recover, Commander. In your system, you're now a failure defeated, captured, your alliance crumbling. But in our system, you're just someone who made a mistake. Someone who can still choose a different path forward. 5 years passed with remarkable speed. The galaxy transformed in ways that historians would study for generations. The rigid alliance system that had maintained an uneasy peace for millennia gave way to a more flexible network of relationships based on mutual benefit rather than military coercion. Jack stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, a massive structure orbiting exactly halfway between Earth and Astraeus. Below him, ships from dozens of worlds docked, peacefully exchanging goods, knowledge, and culture. It was everything he had hoped for, yet more than he had ever imagined possible. At 73, his hair was now completely white, but his bearing remained strong. Years in microgravity had been kind to his arthritic knees, and the advanced medical treatments available in the galaxy had extended his vitality well beyond what Earth medicine could have provided. Alara joined him at the viewport, as beautiful to his eyes as the day they had met in the palace gardens. Their 5 years together had been filled with challenges, diplomatic crises, and the occasional armed conflict as the galaxy adjusted to new possibilities. But through it all, their partnership had remained steady, a living example of the principles they advocated. The Interspecies Medical Academy admitted its first Blackthorn students today, she told him, slipping her hand into his. Jack smiled at the news. Dracon must be having fits. Actually, he approved their applications personally. Ilara's expression held surprise even now. He says that if his people must live in this new galaxy, they should excel at whatever path they choose. The former Supreme Commander had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. After a year of house arrest and rehabilitation, he had shocked everyone by requesting permission to study human history, particularly Earth's bloodiest conflicts and their resolutions. Now he served as a strategic advisor to the new Galactic peacekeeping force, his military genius redirected toward maintaining the very system he had once sought to destroy. People can change when given the chance, Jack observed. That's something Earth's history taught us, though we forget it sometimes. Below them in the station's central atrium, their children played twin 5-year-olds with Ilara's blue skin and Jack's brown eyes. Around them, children from 6 different species engaged in a game that transcended their biological differences. Ambassador Valar sent a message, Ilara said, changing the subject. The Galactic Council is requesting our presence for the treaty signing next week. Jack nodded, though diplomatic functions still felt strange to him. The former combat medic had become improbably one of the galaxy's most respected diplomats, his straightforward approach and focus on practical solutions cutting through centuries of political posturing. Did they say why they need both of us? You're the trained diplomat, Ilara smiled. They're creating a new position, ambassador for interspecies relations. They want you to take it. Jack raised an eyebrow. Me, I'm just a doctor who stumbled into galactic politics. Which is precisely why they want you, she replied. Your approach to problems, finding the third option, refusing to accept unnecessary harm, seeing people as they truly are, it's changed how diplomacy functions. Jack considered this as he watched their children play. In them, he saw the future, a generation growing up without the rigid divisions and cold calculations that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. I'll accept on one condition, he said finally, that you work with me. Your empathic abilities let you understand people in ways I never could. Together we could help solve problems that neither of us could handle alone. Ilara smiled and squeezed his hand. Just like our marriage. Exactly like our marriage. Later that evening, as Jack helped their children prepare for bed, his son asked about the old compass he always kept nearby, the tarnished relic from his days as a combat medic. This belonged to a friend, Jack explained, letting the boy hold the antique. Someone who taught me that sometimes you have to risk everything for what you believe in. Is that why you went to space? His daughter asked, her eyes so like her mother's, filled with curiosity. Jack considered the question. How could he explain to these children born into a galaxy of possibilities what it had meant for an aging doctor to leave behind everything familiar? I went to space because sometimes life gives you unexpected chances to make a difference, he said finally. And the greatest regrets come not from risks taken, but from opportunities missed. As he tucked them in, Jack thought about the journey that had brought him here, from battlefield, hospitals to alien palaces, from saving individual lives to helping reshape an entire galaxy. Margaret would have been amazed. He could almost hear her voice. I always told you that you were meant for something important, Jack. The next morning, Jack stood before a class of medical students from 17 different species. The Interspecies Medical Academy had become his passion project, a place where healing techniques from across the galaxy were shared and improved upon. As he looked at the eager faces before him, he felt the weight of his 73 years balanced by the energy of purpose. The most important thing you can learn as healers, he told them, is to question the parameters of every problem. When someone tells you there are only 2 options, both bad, look for the third. There's always another way if you're brave enough to find it. Later, as he and Ilara prepared for the journey to the Galactic Council headquarters, they paused on their private balcony. The vista before them showed stars and worlds that had once been divided by fear and tradition, now connected by something stronger, shared purpose and mutual respect. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been chosen? Ilara asked. If the mark hadn't appeared on your arm that day? Jack looked at the faded symbol still visible after all these years, a reminder of how one moment can change everything. Someone else would have found the way eventually, Demoni said. The galaxy was ready for change. I was just in the right place at the right time. With the right heart, Alara added. As their ship departed for the council meeting, Jack thought about the legacy they were building, not just for their children, but for countless beings across the galaxy. Historians would mark the wedding of Princess Alara and Dr. Bao. Jack Mason as the beginning of the Great Change, the period when the galaxy shifted from competition and conquest to cooperation and mutual growth. But for the two people who started it all, the real victory was much simpler. They had found each other in a vast and often lonely universe. They had chosen love over fear, hope over cynicism, and partnership over domination. And in doing so, they had shown the entire galaxy that there was a better way to live. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, the stubborn belief that no matter how bad things seemed, there was always a chance to make them better. All it took was the courage to try something new and the wisdom to work together with others who shared the same dream. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. But the greatest wonder of all was the simple fact that different beings could choose to care about each other, and in caring create something beautiful that none of them could have built alone.